Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
The power of the gram. That's right, Instagram. We just started an account over there at Touch MBA where we get one MBA student a week to post about their life and show you scenes and videos that never make the MBA brochure. So I'm really excited about the content we have there. We've had students from IE, McGill in Canada, Texas McCombs, and just this last week, Oxford Said. And it's been eye-opening for me just to see like these experiences in such rich detail. I really believe sharing your experience through pictures and videos is just really powerful. Just something about that goes beyond words. And I'm learning a ton about all these schools. So you could go check us out at Touch MBA over on Instagram. So I'm not an Instagram pro, but to get the account started, I posted a couple videos about my life in Vietnam and just happened to tag one of the posts with hashtag MBA life. And that was discovered by this week's guest, Laura Pan, who is currently a student at the SDA Bocconi MBA in Milan, Italy. She found us through Instagram, reached out to me, and she just happened to be in Ho Chi Minh at the same time. So got together with her and we recorded this episode about her experience as an Australian and Hong Konger living and studying and most likely working in Italy. I've been trying to get this program on the show for a long time, but I'm glad, Laura was in town and we could talk all about her experience and what it's like to be a foreigner studying and working in Italy, which I found really interesting. And I also think that this episode will be evergreen content because it's really about the mindset you need to make a big career change. Laura's goals were to change industry, geography, and function. So to make such a big career jump, you really need to take advantage of any opportunities thrown your way and make the most of them. And I think that Laura's tenacity really shows through in this episode and is instructive for those of you trying to make big career jumps through your MBA. We also talk about Laura's decision to attend, a business school outside the top 10 and the myth and reality of that experience for her. I hope you enjoy this episode, and remember you can get free school selection help at touchmba.com. If you're thinking about studying internationally like Laura was and looking beyond the US, we can really help you and point you in the right direction. So go check that out at touchmba.com. And here we go. We recently started an Instagram account at Touch MBA. By pure chance, when I started the Instagram account, I tagged one of my posts, hashtag MBA life. And I'm so glad I did that, even though I didn't know what I was doing, because Laura Pan found us and reached out to us. And I'm so excited to share her story with you guys. And we're actually in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam right now, recording this live because Laura just happened to be here with her husband.
He's on a business trip, so I decided to tag along since I'm on my summer break.
Yes, but not really a summer break, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's completely fortuitous, but I'm so glad we're here speaking to each other. And so, Laura, welcome to the Touch MBA podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So could you give us a little bit of background about what you were doing before your MBA?
So before the MBA, I actually did a bachelor in process engineering, and I did a double degree also in food technology. So my idea was actually to get into the food manufacturing industry. But when I graduated, the time wasn't so great in Australia, and the hiring market was a little bit depressing. So I had the opportunity to work for the Australian government in a wastewater treatment facility. And from there, I kind of progressed because I found that I was really good at business process improvements. So if you don't know what that is, it's kind of looking at ISO 9001 standards and kind of applying it to the business. So I did that with the Australian government, and then I went on to a few industries, which include oil and gas, automotive, and rail. Right before the MBA, I had moved to Hong Kong because, as Darren said, I'm now married and my husband was living in Hong Kong at the time. So I went to Hong Kong and I worked for a company called Ricardo, where they are involved in the rail and automotive industry. It was there and then when I decided that I no longer found joy in what I was doing. And so I decided to embark on an MBA journey.
And you grew up in Hong Kong, but you were studying in Australia? Is that?
Yeah, so I grew up between Hong Kong and Australia,
Okay.
actually. I spent a lot of my younger years in Australia, and then I went to Hong Kong to be with my husband, but my parents were originally from Hong Kong.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so I love this. This is such a crazy story. So you were doing process engineering for wastewater,
Yeah.
and then also working in food and gas?
Oil and gas.
Oil and gas. I was like, looking at my notes, food and gas, that's probably not right. Oil and gas. And then you decided you really, wanted to take that next step,
Yeah.
right? So what schools were you looking at the time?
So my MBA story is very unique because I was first motivated to do the MBA back in 2009. I was still at university at the time. I met a guy who was working for Pratt & Whitney, which is an American Air Force company. And he did chemical engineering like me, and later on got into a sales position because he did an MBA. And he actually encouraged me to do an MBA because he told me it was kind of a logical step after engineering. So I had looked at a lot of schools, preparing myself to kind of go to the next step. And so I try to look at some of the top 10 schools or like some of the top MBA schools that you could go to. I looked at HBS, Columbia Business School, Imperial College, and also NYU. The reasons I wanted to go to these schools were because they were very well known, and I knew that if I ended up going to these schools, then it would be so much easier for me to kind of get to the next step. But at the time, I didn't know what my next step would be. It wasn't until when I moved to Hong Kong, I realized that I didn't want to do an MBA just to do an MBA. I wanted to do something that was meaningful. And so I had to really do a little bit of soul searching, kind of discover what I was really passionate about and what I really would love doing without having any regrets afterwards. And so what I came up with was to get into the fashion and luxury industry. Since I've been really obsessed with retail and digital transformation in that kind of space, I was looking at maybe getting into a school that could lead me to maybe a career in e-commerce or maybe luxury and fashion. So it was very easy once I've pinpointed those key points out, because then I knew what schools to target. Generally, I think people try to get into top schools because they think it will get you a job at the top company like Microsoft or Amazon, but it might not be something that you really want or love. And I learned that really quickly when I started researching schools, because you are going to go to that school for maybe 1 or 2 years, depending on which school you choose. And it might be a very amazing school like Harvard, but what you come out with might not be the right solution. Like, for example, when I did some research on Columbia, I found that it was really strong on finance. And when I went into their info session, they kept talking about Warren Buffett and how amazing he is because he was an alumni. And for me, it made no sense because I didn't want to go into finance, and Columbia is known as a finance school. Then I went to Imperial College, for example, and they kept pushing the entrepreneurship program. Again, it wasn't really something that I felt was going to motivate me. So I decided it was not the right school for me. And so when I decided I wanted to get into fashion and luxury, I started to narrow down to the schools that I wanted to go to. If you put best luxury MBA schools, you're kind of narrowed down to 3 main schools. There is ESSEC in Paris, which isn't really in Paris. There's NYU in New York City, and there is SDA Bocconi in Milan. As Darren has mentioned, I had actually picked NYU as one of the schools that I wanted to go to. And the reason I didn't pick NYU was because the program is relatively new. I think they introduced it maybe 2-3 years ago. Secondly, it's a 2-year program. And at NYU, I think the luxury business courses are a bunch of electives you can choose. So there's no real structure behind what you would like to do. It could be beneficial to you, but for me, I prefer structure. And so I didn't want to go to ESSEC because I don't speak French and I don't intend on learning French. And so the only other choice was SDA Bocconi. I think SDA Bocconi really spoke to me when I went to one of their information sessions, because while you're attending the class, and I was very lucky because the class I attended was about digital transformation. So they talked about how digital was such a big thing in the fashion and luxury industry. Even though the course was not related to luxury and fashion, it was part of the whole MBA course structure where they would talk a lot about the luxury industry. Yeah. Because it was based in Milan and it is an Italian school, the luxury business is a very big part of the Italian commerce. Mm-hmm. And so when I heard that and when I found that out, it really spoke to me. And that's kind of the reason why I chose Bocconi.
Did you only apply to one school then?
At the end, I only applied to one school.
Wow. Wow. So you really knew what you wanted to do. And actually, I had a question about that. Your background, you had no previous working experience, correct? In luxury brand management or fashion and luxury industry.
Yeah, so absolutely zero. And there were a lot of obstacles to cross, which maybe we can discuss a little bit later.
Yeah, or let's talk about them now, because I know I've also done that Google search before to help applicants. And of course, SDA Bocconi came up, right? But when I was researching the program before this, I realized that there's like an application process to even be part of that concentration, right? So, or they really want to see a focused student.
Basically, the luxury business concentration at Bocconi used to have a selection process.
Yes.
So prior to the 2018 class, which is a class before mine, you had to answer a bunch of essay questions and to show your motivation as to why you wanted to do this course. What happened in the end was that a lot of people who were genuinely interested in the course were not selected because the director of the program was not involved in picking the candidates. Rather, it was the admissions team who was choosing the candidates. An example was an alumni of mine. He wanted to do the program really badly, but he was not selected. So what he did instead was to work really hard to get an exchange to NYU so that he could do the luxury program there. And what actually happened at Bocconi was that 2 or 3 students dropped out of the luxury business program. And it was very unfortunate because if they had known that these people were not as passionate as they were when they applied, the position could have been given to the guy who went to NYU instead. So what they decided was to kind of abolish that program, then give a number of info sessions about what the luxury program entails. And then students were then encouraged to write a motivation letter. And then from there, they had the opportunity to then make, I think, last minute decision as to whether they want to continue or they wanted to drop it.
Got it.
Yeah.
And this is during your application, you have to write this essay, or after you get in?
So after you get in.
I see.
So I think for our year, we had about 30 or more students who were really interested in the luxury program. I spoke to a few of my classmates who said they wanted to do luxury, but they didn't really know what luxury was. I think the program just sounded very interesting to them.
Sure.
And then after the info sessions, I think at least 2/3 of them dropped out. So now we have only 11 students who are doing the luxury program.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your class has about 100 students each year.
Yes.
Right, to be clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to that. Like, you didn't have any working experience in luxury fashion.
Yeah.
So was that a big part of your career goals in your application?
In my application, they were asking kind of like, what is your 5-year and 10-year plan, right? And I knew that another reason why I applied to Bocconi was because I was very motivated to work for a fashion and luxury brand within Italy, or an Italian luxury brand.
Yes.
And so in my admissions essay, I wrote my motivation of getting into a specific luxury brand in Italy to work in their marketing department, because I was so inspired by their digital marketing approach that it kind of made me realize this is what I wanted to do. I knew that to kind of get there, I had to either go to school with a lot of connections in that industry. It's well known with the people who work in those industries, and also maybe a school that could help me make that jump from an engineering background to somewhere in fashion and luxury. So I knew that Bocconi had all three of those, because there have been a lot of success stories at Bocconi where people were working in finance or working in something that was not related to fashion and luxury, and then ending up in those industries.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you started last September.
Yes.
Started last September. And I mean, I guess you had some experience with Italy because your husband's from there?
So,
or was it really like your first time?
Technically, I've never lived in Italy, but because my husband is Italian, his family lives there. And so I used to visit Milan like 4 times a year.
Okay.
I know Milan relatively well. And in some ways, I felt like it was going to be a easier transition to move to Italy because at least I have family there.
Yeah.
It was a lot easier for my husband as well because he works for a company where the headquarters is in Milan. Because we're doing a long distance relationship at the moment, it would be easier for him to justify to come back to Milan than to go to somewhere like Paris or New York, for example.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he's based in Hong Kong?
Hong Kong,
Got it.
yeah.
I'd like to get your opinion on a couple of things. You know, one is simply the experience of getting your MBA in a place like Italy where, I mean, I'm guessing you don't speak fluent Italian, or maybe you do and I just don't know.
Unfortunately, I don't.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, that's quite a big step, right? I mean, you mentioned your initial idea was to go to big brand name.
Yeah.
And Bocconi is certainly a big brand name, but probably less well known in the US or even in Asia, in some parts in Asia. So like, I'm both curious about the actual experience of living and studying in Italy and also dealing with the perceptions of living and studying in Italy. If that makes sense.
When I decided to go to Bocconi, I don't think I had much of an expectation. I just knew that if I were to go to Italy, I have to somehow speak Italian. In some ways, Milan is a relatively good city to be in if you decide to do an international MBA, because English is still relatively widely spoken. Having said that, not everyone speaks English, and you kind of need to know some basic Italian to kind of get around. Like, yes, no, how much is this, or I want this, like just general like terminology. Living in Italy is actually very good, I would say, because I was raised in Melbourne and then I moved to Hong Kong. A struggle that I had when I was living in Hong Kong was that everything was so crazy and hectic. People were not very communicative and friendly. And when you get immersed in somewhere like Milan, for example, people are so warm-hearted, so nice, and so helpful. And it really reminded me of being back in Melbourne. So when I was in Hong Kong, I felt so homesick constantly. But the moment I went to Italy and lived there for a few months, I didn't feel as homesick because it gave me a sense of comfort or a sense of home. I think it really depends on like what type of person you are. Like, are you a person that really likes that crazy lifestyle? If you do, then Hong Kong and New York would be like a really good place to go to. Otherwise, like for me, I am kind of a homebody. And in many ways, Milan and Melbourne are very, very similar. And so for me, it was it was a more suitable city for me. In terms of doing the MBA at SDA Bocconi, with all international MBAs, the spoken language is English. So you can get around relatively easy with your professors or with the people within the schools and they will speak to you in English. Other than that, I think, like I said, Italians are relatively warm and very kind-hearted. So it's a good experience because you meet, because 30% of our class is Italians. And I think you will get a completely different experience there because I feel that I really made genuine friendships that were constantly there for me no matter what. They accept you despite the way you look or your ethnicity. There's no really any social barriers when it comes to Italians, and they're a very accepting like culture, I would say.
That sounds great. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of listeners are thinking about the Italian food. How's that?
So I get a lot of hate for this. Because
all right. Soapbox. I'll give you the soapbox. Stand on it.
Because I don't love Italian food. I like it. I just don't love it. My preference is, of course, Asian food. And I would say one of my biggest struggle in Milan is that you don't get really good Asian food. But a benefit of that is that if you can cook Asian food, it's a really good opportunity to bond with your classmates because then you can introduce culture. Yeah. Like Darren has seen that I've done dumpling parties with my Italian friends and they really loved it. So I had like friends from China, friends from Italy, and also some friends from Asia who came to my house. We wrapped dumplings, we pan-fried it, we boiled it, and we told them stories and history about dumpling. Yeah. And it's kind of a good way to kind of share that culture. I think you don't get that as much if you go to a more metropolized city or a more cosmopolitan city, because then people already have that knowledge.
Yeah. Interesting. And then, so you've gotten through the whole core now of the program. Pretty much, right? And was business school, the actual education itself a struggle for you in any way?
So because my background is in engineering and I've worked in kind of business process improvement, and I didn't really touch anything in the area of finance or investments. I think one of the most difficult thing for me to grasp was the core subjects in finance and investments. To be honest, it's relatively straightforward. It's not rocket science. But when you've never been in that been in that kind of mindset before, having to reshuffle your brain to kind of understand what that really means and the lingo, I think was very difficult for me. to kind of add salt to the wound, at Bocconi, because it is a 1-year program, you kind of rush through a lot of the subjects. In our first term, we only had about 4.5 weeks to go through all the core subjects. So we did economics, finance, and accounting all in like 4.5 weeks. So imagine a person who has absolutely no exposure to that kind of content and then having to know everything in such a short time. It was really difficult, but I think that's a good thing about being in an intense MBA. It really kind of wakes you up and make you realize that you're in the MBA because you have, they believe that you have the ability to like soak up this information and then apply it like in such a short time. But it's the real world. I mean, when you go to work for a company, you don't really have like 3 months to learn everything, you know?
Absolutely. So. And what has been your most useful class so far?
Oh, wow. I think
this is the first time I've asked this question, and I'm actually going to start asking this question to more students and alumni because it's interesting to see as well. Like you're still very close to it. Yeah. Right. You're still going through the program, but I'm sure some alumni 10 years out might have a different answer. But
so one of the things that really surprised me the most was that the subject that really helped me, in my opinion, would have been marketing 101. So I think the reason is because marketing touches a lot of points within any business, right? So like, for example, I was just showing Darren a competitive analysis that I was doing, and it was pretty spectacular, by the way.
And I hope maybe we can share that at some point. Actually, that won't happen, but it was pretty spectacular.
So had I not done like marketing, I don't think I would have known the basics of how to kind of present this competitive analysis. And I've been working on a lot of projects on my own, and I've realized that a lot of it has to do with marketing, like what is push and pull marketing and what's the customer journey and building a persona. All that is marketing. And if you don't have that as a basis, I don't think you really truly understand how a business can be promoted. No,
you're preaching to the choir. I think like marketing and innovation in terms of your offer, my personal opinion, those are the two most important things in business. But let's talk about your internship. So you came into Bocconi with this goal, like I'm going to do what I call a 3D switch to my listeners. So I'm going to change geography, I'm going to change industry, and most likely, or maybe change function. Right? How did that go? And how did you land your internship? Please tell us about it.
So this is a very interesting story. Basically, as Darren has mentioned previously, I didn't have any experience in retail, marketing, or fashion, or anything to do with the luxury and fashion industries. So when it came to applying for internships, it was near impossible. Let's just put it that way. So as I mentioned previously, Bocconi has very good connections with a lot of fashion brands. Let's just say, for example, the luxury concentration at SDA Bocconi is actually partnered up with Gucci, LVMH, and Valentino. So in that aspect, we were very lucky because we had direct contact with the HR directors or managers who were working in those groups, and they could somehow give us a job had we applied to the company. So 2 of them got internships with Gucci and 1 got an internship with Valentino. Unfortunately, this year, a lot of fashion and luxury companies were not hiring MBAs because, as I mentioned to Darren, a lot of these companies don't really value an MBA candidate. They don't understand what an MBA candidate can provide or bring any value, because at the end of the day, they are in some ways a very backwards thinking industry where they think that, oh, if you want to get into marketing, then you will have a degree in marketing. If you were to get into buying or merchandising, then you would have something to do with economics, for example, or you're very good with numbers. If you were to get into retail operations, then you would have past experience as a sales assistant. So this is kind of the industry that I was trying to break into. And with my background as an engineer, they didn't see the fit at all.
Yeah.
So for me, I think in some ways I was very unlucky and also very lucky because essentially when I was looking for internships, the school wasn't able to help very much because there were not a lot of jobs on offer. But I came into Bocconi specifically targeting a few Italian fashion brands, and they were all within the LVMH group. So LVMH is a group that is very retail centric. And if you have participated in any of the career fairs, they would constantly tell you that they will only hire you if you have retail experience. And what they have is this program which is called Manager in Training. And the Manager in Training program is to essentially get you into the retail space. So work as a sales assistant and slowly move up into a higher position. So regardless, you still have to stay at least a few months in the store serving clients. This wasn't something that I was entirely interested in because my husband, who does work in the retail space, spent majority of his career in retail and then kind of climbed up to management. And he told me, what's the point of doing an MBA if you're going to sink to that level and be a sales assistant? I don't agree with him 100% because the retail business, you have to have some sort of retail experience. But at the same time, I knew that because I came into the MBA at such a late age, I didn't want to kind of go back and then climb back up again because then I would be wasting a lot of time. So what happened was I pitched to the career service team to basically get me a job at these companies. And they tried really hard to kind of push my CV, but to no avail. So nobody had replied or responded. And so I decided to go onto LinkedIn, the magic world of LinkedIn. It was such an interesting story because there was one time I was going through LinkedIn and I was scrolling through the newsfeed. And somehow, I think it was because I followed Loro Piana, the company, I followed the company Loro Piana on LinkedIn. And so a notification popped up and it was, so someone within Loro Piana management shared a position. And so I replied to his message and I asked him if he would consider an MBA candidate. And he said, sure, why not? And then I looked into his profile and I realized that he himself had done an MBA. He did his MBA at LBS and also I think he did an exchange at Columbia. And so I was thinking, wow, if this guy has an MBA, he must understand the value of an MBA candidate. So I went to the official website to apply, and then I wrote him a short motivation letter through a LinkedIn message. So he replied immediately and said, wow, interesting. I look forward to seeing you at the interview. Anyway, 1.5 months pass and I didn't hear anything. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm probably not going to get this job. I was really, really excited because Loro Piana was one of the top companies that I really wanted to work for. And then
was it for a manager in training?
No. So it was actually for the position was for worldwide store operations.
Okay. Yep.
So out of nowhere, I was on a study tour with my fellow luxury business concentration classmates, and I received a message on LinkedIn from the same guy, and he said, hey, did you submit your CV? And I said, yes, I did. And he said, okay, it's strange, but we'd never received it. And I was like, okay. Then he sent me a message with his personal email address and said, can you please forward it to me now? So I did that. And I got a call from HR on the same day within 4 hours.
Crazy.
So essentially what happened was LVMH HR actually has a program which is called Spider. And what they do is they pick out keywords in your CV to filter it out.
Wow.
So what happened with me is because I had zero background in merchandising, buying, retail, sales, marketing, my profile just got kind of ignored.
Yeah.
Or it just went
Forgotten.
into limbo somewhere. And that is the reason why they never received my CV. And somehow this is I think this is the reality of like fashion and retail industries, because they have so many people applying. They really need to filter out which are the people who have the right skills and who don't. Unfortunately, I didn't. But this guy who, because he had a background because this guy has an MBA, he probably was able to recognize talent without really judging me based on what was written on my CV. So he took it upon himself to give me a chance. And in preparation for the interview, I basically went, I would say maybe above and beyond to prepare a presentation based on what I thought the role was going to be. So the role is in a worldwide store operations, and what they wanted to do is somehow enhance customer experience. And what I did was to, like I said just now, apply marketing basics to kind of do competitive analysis with Loro Piana and its competitors, and how it could actually exceed its competitors by doing things like storytelling or standardizing customer service, so on and so forth. When I did the interview and presented my slides or presentation, the interviewer was actually very impressed. And within a week or two, they basically took me on board. So I think one of the things that you need to take away from my story is probably that if, opportunities are rare, but once you do get the opportunity, you have to kind of go above and beyond to actually get it. Because if, for example, I had not gone into the interview with the presentation, they might have thought that I'm kind of blah. Like,
right. Or just another candidate.
Yeah, or just another candidate. Like, why is she so special? And what's so special about a person with an MBA, And I think you really need to showcase what you've learned in the MBA and kind of apply it to make you stand out.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people take advantage of the fact that like, oh, I have an MBA on my CV, so you have to hire me. But unless you can prove that, how are they going to really understand that, yes, this person is worth my time or worth the headcount?
I love that. And so how many interviews did you have to go through to get this internship?
Essentially just one.
Just that one interview.
Yeah.
And just to make it absolutely clear, Laura she wasn't asked to prepare that competitor analysis. She took it upon herself to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And show her interviewer that. So that's a great tip. And so now you're going through your internship and you're probably trying to angle for a job offer. So how did that go?
So basically, I was in a really funny position because I was one of the last people in the whole MBA to score an internship. So all of my classmates had already secured something or were going to work on the entrepreneurship project.
And they happen in quarter 3, right?
Yes.
In the third quarter.
Yeah.
So imagine the program's broken into 4 quarters.
Yeah.
You go through the core in the first 2, and then you do your internship in the third, or your entrepreneurship project.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it was very disheartening, I think, to know that you were one of the last people to get it. But because the summer is so short, one of the things that you have to understand in Italy is that if you do come and study or plan to work in Italy, they basically take all of August off as holiday. So I had only gone my internship late June, and essentially I had 1.5 months, about 7.5 weeks of internship.
Wow. Yeah.
So I had such a short time to prove to them that I am of value, so that I would have, maybe an opportunity to kind of negotiate a full-time position. Because essentially when you get into an MBA internship, that's kind of what you're angling for, right? With such a short time, I kind of took it upon myself to do the best I could, And throughout the MBA, I actually spoke to a lot of people who did the same kind of jump as me, maybe coming from finance or coming from industry and then jumping into the fashion and luxury industry. And they said to me that how they have succeeded has always been to kind of show how much value you can bring to your immediate manager, because they're the people who will then decide whether or not they want to hire you. And so that's what I did. When I got into Loro Piana, my manager was really struggling because she was the only person who was managing a really, really large project. And she wanted an intern really badly so that that person could help her kind of sort through all the mess. And I took it upon myself to basically make sure that her life was easier. So whenever she gave me a little project or a little assignment, I would try to do it as best as I can and kind of make sure that she could trust me and that she can go on worrying about something else and not be too nervous about giving me a project. Within 2 weeks of working with her, she gained full trust with me, and then she started assigning a lot of the work to me because she knew that I could handle it, and also I could do it responsibly in a way that would not put her in a bad light. So by the end of the 7 weeks, she was so impressed that she actually came to me with a verbal offer. So
amazing.
I think it's a very strange situation because I don't think you would get an offer in such a short time generally.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so are we talking, were there a lot of sleepless nights during this internship period, or was it just, good hard work put in during the day?
So this is a very, very strange situation. Technically, the role that I applied for was supposed to be for 6 months. And unfortunately, because I am kind of in between terms, I could only do the 3 months as suggested by the school. But because of the Italian holiday, I couldn't do that. And when I told my manager, she had no choice but to hire a second intern. And at the time when I heard about the second intern coming in, I was very nervous because I was thinking, oh, wow, if I don't do well, then I would be passed off to this new person who's coming in. So I had a lot of kind of pep talks with my husband. And I said, okay, you know what? I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to do my best and basically try to show how much value I can bring and then let her make that judgment.
Yeah.
I didn't really expect her to come up with a verbal offer actually by the end of my internship. But because it happened, I knew that all my hard work really paid off.
That's so awesome. Congratulations.
Thank
too.
you.
So then I'm sure a long journey from the very beginning of the process, I applied to business school and even thinking about the industry.
Yeah, I think it was really difficult because being with Bocconi, I think, was a very good opportunity to actually go to different companies. So we visited Fendi, we visited Gucci, we visited Valentino. And we also got to speak with a lot of people and also the HR. And in some ways, the HR kind of puts you down and make you realize that like, for you to work here, it's going to be very difficult. Or we probably don't need a person like you because you have no background that can really benefit us. And I was very, very, I guess, disappointed at the very beginning. And then when I finally got the internship with Loro Piana, it made me realize that if you set your heart to do something and you work really hard, you will get it in the end. You know, it's not, you shouldn't, like, you can be maybe let down by a lot of things, but you have to keep striving for it.
Yeah. And like control what's in your power. Like,
exactly.
What you were saying, like, contribute the most value you can, make your manager's life easier, and hopefully they make the right decision. Make it like stupid for them to not hire you.
Yeah, exactly.
The comedian Steve Martin in the US used to always say, like, be so good that they can't ignore you, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, it sounds like exactly what you did.
I think that's something that you probably need to live by.
Absolutely. And so I do have to ask, like, did your other international classmates have a similar experience? Did they really also have to hustle up internships and jobs?
So,
because what is it like looking for, internships and jobs as an international student?
I think generally in European schools, it's very difficult for international students. So generally, even if you go to a really top school like SDA, for example, the career services are not generally there, or the career services can't really help very much because they are connected with a lot of local companies. And sometimes it's kind of what they offer, right? Because most people go to European business schools to want to work in Europe. And so the career services are generally more connected with the local companies. But unfortunately, local companies are looking for MBA candidates who do speak the local language. Like, for example, I went to a career fair in Barcelona and I met a few HR people from Inditex. So Inditex is known for the giant retailer Zara. And the first thing that they asked me was, do you speak Spanish? And I said no. So immediately, it wasn't like they were dismissing me. It was almost like, no, we're not that interested because you don't speak Spanish. And it's the same in Italy. A lot of the companies there are looking for people who speak a European language, either it be Spanish, Italian, or German, mostly. So a lot of our German classmates, a lot of our Italian and Spanish classmates found it relatively easy to get an internship. It was a little bit more difficult for people who came from India, China, or other parts of Asia, because actually their main strength is in English. And for those students, it's really difficult because companies, even though you don't speak Italian fluently, they need some sort of basic Italian or a medium level Italian, so that you can kind of communicate with your colleagues at the company. I think that's one of the downfalls. And I think a lot of the international students did struggle a lot with getting a job. But I would also say that a lot of the international students were very naive to think that, just because they did an MBA or they're in Bocconi, they will get a job. And I don't think they should think like that. I don't think they should have thought like that, because at the end of the day, you are competing with a lot of other business schools within Europe. Like, there are some top European MBAs like HEC, INSEAD, and also IE MBA. So to actually prove that you're better than these other top schools, you have to show your value, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, Nike came to our school. They had about 13 managers appear at our info session, and they didn't hire a single student. whereas INSEAD
Wow.
got like 4 or 5 people placed in
Yeah.
internships. So it really has to do with how well you hustle and how well you're able to kind of like blow the HR away. But I would also want to say that sometimes it's not about maybe impressing the HR, but impressing the hiring manager.
Yeah.
I think that's probably more important than anything. And a lot of the times, maybe the international students have this belief that because they're in one of the top schools in Europe,
Yeah.
that, you know, career services are just going to hand them an internship. And that doesn't really work in European business schools. I think a lot of it is a lot of hustle and your own hard work. I was just telling Darren an example of my friend who, although is European, but he wanted to work in a tech company. So he found a job at Facebook through LinkedIn. And when he finally got an interview, he basically wowed them by telling Facebook what they were doing well, what they were not doing well, how they could improve themselves so they're in a different position. And the hiring manager who interviewed him was so impressed that he basically got a job with a huge offer, you know, and the career service didn't help him at all. And this is, I think, one of the things that you really have to understand. As an MBA candidate, you shouldn't be spoon-fed an internship or a career. If you really want it that bad, you should think about why you're in the MBA and what do you want afterwards, and how hard are you willing to work for that.
I know, it's like I'm speechless, and I think it's really good to hear that. I think it's easy to think, because the way the schools market themselves, and also these beautiful brochures and images, and all the promo material, that you're just going to show up and next thing you know, you got a great job. But there's a lot of work that has to happen to get from A to C.
Yeah.
You got to go through that B part. And I mean, on that note, like, what is it like as an international student dealing with alumni from your school? Because, I know SDA Bocconi has like over 100,000 alumni.
Yeah.
It's a great reputation in Europe and in Italy, but you guys are still, quote unquote, international students, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel as much a part of that network?
I think one of the things that maybe Bocconi is really well known for is to actually leverage on your alumni. So I would even go as far to say that the person who helped me with my interview at Loro Piana was a person who was in the MBA the year before me. So she was the one who actually gave me the idea to do a presentation. So,
this. Yeah.
Yeah. So she was, she had a similar path as I did. She came from supply chain and operations. She had zero experience in the retail and luxury industry. And when she finally got an interview with Loro Piana, she decided, okay, but I would say that she did the interview with Loro Piana as a MBA graduate. So she had already graduated and she's done a lot of projects already. And so she basically decided that she was going to do a presentation that was related to her position to present to the HR who was going to interview her. And when I got the call from the HR of Loro Piana, the first person I called was my alumni. And I said, okay, I need your help. I want to know everything about the company. Like, what should I, I think this is a really good thing about being at Bocconi, because, and also one of the things that maybe I've mentioned to Darren is that one of the main reasons I decided to go to Bocconi is because that the alumni is so spread out within the fashion and luxury industry, especially in e-commerce, that if you do want to work in a specific company like Zalora or Lazada or Farfetch, you have a lot of people to rely on. I was in Barcelona for a career fair, and I met a girl who is actually studying at INSEAD, and she was working at Zalora in Singapore. And then when she heard that I came from SDA Bocconi, she was like, oh my God, did you know that like almost 30% of the people in our office who are managers came from Bocconi. And so it's a very well-known school to go to because of the alumni network. And so if, for example, I wanted to know more about, let's just say, the company Farfetch, it was one of the ideal companies that I really wanted to work for. And I was able to connect with a girl who did the master's in fashion and design. And she was the one who ended up connecting me with a bunch of people there who then I could ask about like specific jobs, specific roles, and specific activities that they were doing. And it really helped me gain a perspective from the inside. And this is really beneficial.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I have one more question, or two more questions, but is there anything about Bocconi that you think more people from outside the region should know about the school, that maybe it wasn't evident to you when you were applying?
Essentially, Bocconi is really bad at one thing, and that is marketing themselves. So I didn't know about Bocconi until, I went on to Financial Times top 100 schools. And basically when you go into topmba.com or one of those websites, you can actually narrow down like the areas of study that you want to kind of focus on. And when I looked at the area of study, like fashion and luxury, Bocconi popped up. And I, at that time, didn't even know that Bocconi had an MBA program. I only knew that they had a Master's of Science and Master's of Finance because I had friends who went there. And then when I finally saw it, I basically decided, okay, I might give it a shot. And then I told my husband, I asked my husband actually, like, oh, what do you think if I were to go and do my MBA in Milan? I was really nervous about telling him at the time because he was really happy in Hong Kong and he didn't want to go back. But then when I told him, he was really, really happy about it. So in that essence, like for me, I didn't know, and many people won't know about Bocconi because they don't market themselves at all. But one of the things that I was really surprised about is that there were a lot of there's a really, really big alumni network. So a lot of people know about Bocconi. If you are to work for any fashion companies, Italian or French, if you kind of just drop the name Bocconi, they would like pick it up and understand immediately. They're like, okay, yeah, we know that school. And that's the most surprising thing for me.
Yeah.
Apart from that, I don't think there is anything that really caught me by surprise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so to bring this full circle, wow, what an incredible journey you've been on. You went to the school that wasn't on your first list, but you found it going to some websites, right? I'm just curious, like, how that has been, how you feel about attending a school like SDA Bocconi versus what could have been, knock on wood, what could have been an HBS or an LBS or an NYU or Columbia, like you mentioned, or Imperial. What has been the myth and reality of your experience, right? Like, where I'm trying to get at is, how important are these rankings?
In my honest opinion, these rankings are not very important. But it really depends on...
Whoa. Stop there.
But it really depends on
important?
What you really want to achieve after your MBA. I think there are a few things to note about doing an MBA, right? So if you have a background in finance, for example, and you want to get into, venture capital, or you want to get into a really, really big bank, even though you worked in a boutique bank before, going into a top school might give you the right connections and also kind of the name on your CV. I know for sure that there are a lot of companies who only accept candidates from top 10 schools, right? It could be maybe like Tencent in China, Alibaba, Google, or Amazon, for example. So if you're aiming for those companies specifically, then it is important to go to a top 10 school. But if you're not aiming for those companies specifically, and you're looking for a school that's, really good for marketing, or really good for innovation, or really good for entrepreneurship, then you have to find a school that's specific to your needs. So you wouldn't want to go to maybe, I don't know, let's just say you wouldn't want to go to SDA Bocconi if you want to focus on entrepreneurship. Even though we have a good entrepreneurship program, it's not as well known as Babson College in Boston, or it's not as well known as Imperial College in the UK. Or you wouldn't go to, let's just say, HKUST for finance, even though it's based in one of the biggest finance hubs in the world. You'd probably choose, let's just say, HBS or Columbia University, because they have such a strong finance faculty. And it was the same for me. I mean, what's the point of going to, I don't know, let's just say Columbia if I want to get into luxury, because yes, it's based in New York and it has all these connections, but one of the things that Bocconi also does is that with the luxury business concentration, we were able to visit the factories of Gucci. We were able to look at the innovation lab. We were exposed to the fur factory in Fendi. We also got to spend a week in retail to actually deep dive into what the world is like in the luxury industry. This is something that you won't get to experience if you went to a different school. Having said that LVMH was so focused on having retail experience, being able to be given an opportunity to spend a week in retail, and I spent a week at Valentino, and I learned a lot. I learned how the selling ceremony is all about, how to deal with difficult customers. These are experiences that you will never get an opportunity to do unless you are very specific with what school you're going into and what they can offer.
Yeah.
Right? So I was telling Darren before that a lot of people might have the stigma of not going to the best schools because, they might not be the only person within their friendship group who's done an MBA, and they might feel maybe not as successful or not as smart because they didn't get to Harvard or INSEAD. And it's not always the case. I think you have to really justify what you want to achieve at the end with what school you want to get into. I mean, there was a particular classmate of mine who came into Bocconi and said, I want to do marketing, but I think that marketing at Bocconi is really bad, so I'm going to a different school. And I said, why did you choose Bocconi then? I mean, if you really wanted to go to marketing, why don't you go to Kellogg, for example? Or you could have gone to maybe a even cheaper school than a US MBA that has a really good marketing program. You don't have to choose it because you heard it's good. Do your research, and that's really what I want to say. Don't be embarrassed about what school you get into, but choose the right school for the right needs. That's what I have to say.
And let's end it there. Let's end it on that message. Laura, thank you so much for opening, up your world to us and showing us what it's really like to attend a program like SDA Bocconi and get jobs in the industry that you set out to break into. That's so awesome. I also want to say that Laura has generously posted on our ambassadors forum. Yep. So if you just Google Touch MBA ambassadors Laura Pan, Pan, you can find her thread there and ask her questions. She'll also be taking over our Instagram. I'm excited for that.
Yeah, in September.
Sometime in September.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure we publish this before that.
Yeah. So I'm also planning a few kind of trips during that week. So maybe you can have a better exposure into the fun things that we do at Bocconi.
Yeah, because I, Laura's Instagram, it looks like you guys are also having fun. Like your dumpling parties looked fun, and some of the other things you're doing. So there is that fun social side to the MBA as well that we hope to show through Instagram, because it's a pretty good medium to show that stuff.
Yeah.
You're not going to take pictures of yourself like with your eyes popping out of your forehead.
No.
Right?
I won't post anything boring, I promise. Unfortunately, it won't be Fashion Week, because the good thing about being in Milan is that we have the Fashion Week.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
It would just be like runway shots.
Yeah. I think Darren has looked at a few of my Insta stories, and I was watching a fashion show in the middle of class. I'm still very proud of that. So
that was pretty funny.
I think that's a really good thing about like doing the MBA in Milan, because you're just like in the middle of it.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Laura. And let's good luck on your journey.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your #1 school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.